All right, everyone. I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the deception that convention of states tends to use. Now, we'll start with this little article that they put out. This is very common of them. It's a common talking point of them to say an Article 5 convention is not a constitutional convention. So they try to establish, now they don't, of course, cite any dictionary definitions or anything like that, but what they try to do is say basically that it's terribly inappropriate to use the term constitutional convention to describe what the convention of states organization is trying to accomplish. And they say that, well, constitutional convention is for coming up with a totally new constitution, and they're not trying to do that, basically. So let's see how much that holds water, because they've got some explaining to do here. And now, one other talking point they use is, if you're against a convention of states, an Article 5 convention, whatever you want to call it, but not a constitutional convention, of course, then you're siding with Hillary Clinton and all kinds of liberal people. So they also even used this clip from Hillary Clinton from 2017 when she was interviewed by Vox, and show what she said about that.
Because we don't control the media environment the same way the right does. It's harder for our message to get out. So it's okay to say, all right, let's really work for change, but you're going to have to build an edifice under that.
8 and 16 candidacies, and that taken the stance was much less.
Which we find ourselves right now. But you see, I also think I'm very realistic about the forces that are arrayed against the kind of change I want to see. There's a big move for change coming from the right that I think would be disastrous for our country. They want radical, pull them up by the roots change. They want to have a constitutional convention to rewrite our Constitution to make it friendlier to business, to inject, religious and ideological elements. So talk about radical change. They are pursuing it, they are funding it, and they are electing people who are either true believers or willing vehicles for it.
All right. Sorry about the little mix-up there, but you probably picked up a couple things. Hillary Clinton's not for what she calls a constitutional convention, which the people on the right are pushing for, and they're pushing for radical change. Now, the kind of funny thing with this is that Mark Meckler and the Convention of States organization, they come up and say, see, she's talking about our movement. Kind of interesting, because usually when somebody would use the term constitutional convention, say, oh, no, that's not what we're trying to accomplish. But in this case, they want to try to associate anybody who opposes the Convention of States project as siding with Hillary Clinton. That's the spin they want to put on this one. So they choose their spin conveniently for their own purpose, as you might say. All right, now let's take a look at Justice Scalia. Now this one's a little interesting. What they do is, now this is a clip from 2015. He was interviewed, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg was with him, but just a little question and answer session. All right.
Stevens recently suggested a constitutional amendment to modify the Second Amendment. If you could amend the Constitution in one way, what would it be and why? Justice Scalia.
I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. I mean, whoa. Who knows what would come out of that? But if...
Okay, so from that, you pretty well pick up very clearly that Justice Antonin Scalia at the time did not want a constitutional convention. A lot of uncertainty surrounding that in his mind at the time. All right, now let's go back to 1979. This is an article put online by Convention of States. You'll see at the top. And let's take a look through here. It says, well, People argue that Justice Scalia evolved over time on his stance. It says that that while they acknowledge that he argued strenuously and at length in favor of a limited Article 5 convention in 1979, they tout more recently sound bites as evidenced that he changed his position toward the end of his life. We believe this mischaracterizes his views. Oh, mischaracterization. Not something you want to do, I suppose. So here's the quotations. And then it says, an open constitutional convention is a different creature entirely from an Article 5 convention to propose amendments on limited specific topics. While Justice Scalia opposed, as indicated by his words, was an open constitutional convention at which commissioners would be empowered to write a constitution. That's interesting. But at the same time, he wanted a constitutional convention. Let's take a look at this little clip here.
With or to deal with specific problems.
All right, Professor Scalia, Richard Revere in the New Yorker suggested that the convention method of amendment might reinstate segregation and even slavery, throw out much or all of the Bill of Rights, eliminate the 14th Amendment's due process clause, and reverse any Supreme Court decision the members didn't like, and perhaps for good measure, eliminate the Supreme Court itself. Now, what would you anticipate from an unlimited convention?
None of that. I suppose it might even pass a bill of attainder to hang Richard Revere. All of those things are possible, I suppose, just as it's possible.
Now you notice the question is, what would you anticipate from an unlimited convention?
That the Congress tomorrow might pass a law abolishing Social Security as of the next day, or eliminating Christmas. Sure, such things are possible, remotely possible. I don't have any fear that such proposals as extreme as he's talking about would come out of the Constitutional Convention. Surely, whether that...
Notice he calls it a constitutional convention.
That risk is sufficient to cause you to be opposed to a constitutional convention depends upon how high you think the risk is and how necessary you think the convention is. If you thought the Congress were not necessary for any other purpose, the risk that it might abolish Social Security would probably be enough to cause you to tell them to go home. So it really comes down to whether you think a constitutional convention is necessary.
So there's his position. Now, that was 1979. He was a professor of law at the time, not Justice Scalia. He was not on the Supreme Court in 1979. But, of course, that is kind of brushed over by convention of states. So just to summarize, convention of states will pick and choose what little tidbits they want to use at the time to try to put their spin on different things and try to convince you that, well, if you're with Scalia, if you like Justice Scalia, then you must be for convention of states. But if you're with Hillary Clinton and if you're conservative, then you must be with Hillary and just a bad person, because pretty much everybody on the right, they think that Hillary Clinton must be this bad person. So hopefully that explains that a little bit, what they tried to do, and play with words a little bit, but we'll see if we can wrap it up right there. All right.